will need no introduction. He is a scientist, a best-selling author, an entrepreneur. He was a CEO and founder of the machine learning startup Geometric Intelligence that was acquired by Uber, of course. He's an emeritus professor of psychology and neuroscience at New York University. He's the author of 5 books, and his most recent one, Rebooting AI with Ernest Davis, is one of Forbes' 7 must-read books in AI. So it's a real treat to have him join us. He's joining virtually to share his unadulterated views on taming Silicon Valley. So ladies and gentlemen, please give a very warm welcome to Professor Gary Marcus, who will be talking to Monique van Dusseldorp, Content Director at Inspired Minds. Over to you, Monique.
All right. Gary, so good to see you. It's very, very early in the morning where you are. It's at the end of the day here, and we had a day full of super interesting conversations about everything AI can do, cannot do, what is dangerous, what the geopolitical implications are, and a lot more. You are here with us because you have very clear thoughts about what's happening right now in the world of AI and the world in general. And you wrote a book called Taming Silicon Valley, and that's the topic of this conversation. Now, let's start. You feel that the turn the AI world is taking right now is maybe not good. Could you explain why?
Well, I don't know if we have enough time for that, but I'll give you a short version of it. I like to say that, you hear me okay?
Yeah, I don't hear my ear, but I can hear you. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Current AI is both morally and technically inadequate. So from a technical standpoint, the big problem is everybody has put almost all their investment in a hypothesis, which for a long time I've said is incorrect, called scaling. And the idea behind the scaling hypothesis was we would get to AGI or trustworthy intelligence or something like that by just adding more data and more compute. And if we kept doing that, we would get there. We all knew that the early models were not very good, that they weren't reliable, and adding more data helped some, and adding more data helped some. But what I said in 2022 is that scaling is not a physical law like gravity. It's just an empirical generalization that we've seen for a certain period of time. But there are certain fundamental things that are not going to get fixed that way. Hallucinations, stupid errors, things like that, reasoning problems. Everybody laughed at me at the time when I said that. But there's been, I mean, literally, they ridiculed me on the internet and so forth. But in the last few weeks, there's been a very widespread recognition that what I said was true. Not that anybody said acknowledge that I said it, but for example, Satya Nadella just gave a talk that reads very much like my deep learning is hitting a wallpaper from 2022. He said it's not a physical law, we're going to need new approaches. And that's right, we're going to need new approaches. Finally, this is being recognized. It took a couple years and a couple $100 billion, which I think could have been spent in better ways, but people are finally realizing. There's an old joke about 6 months in the lab can save you an hour in the library. It's sort of like that. $200 billion have saved people from having to listen to me, sort of.
Okay, now
that's one side.
Yeah, so one side is you describe, you see, and a lot of people do see it, that there's sort of diminishing returns and that the technology is opaque and it still can't get really basic things right. So that's right. A critical analysis of what large language models do.
So that's the technical side.
But there's also a moral side to this, right? What is your moral vision on this development?
The moral side, and they're not unrelated, I should say. The moral side is if you have software that is unreliable, that hallucinates, that doesn't understand basic requests, although it kind of pretends to do so by approximating human speech, you wind up with the technology you can't really control. So the Apple system prompt says, don't hallucinate, and the system hallucinates. If you say, don't do anything that might deceive people, it's still going to sometimes deceive people. In fact, that's becoming an increasing problem. If you say, don't be biased against people, good luck with that. In fact, we know that these systems are covertly racist. Depending on the dialect that you speak, you get a different answer. People have been using them for employment decisions. They treat white males better than other people, etc. So there are many problems with them morally. And The deepest one is in the long term, we have no way to control this particular kind of architecture. So what we're talking about, LLMs, are black boxes. And what that means is we put in a whole bunch of stuff and something comes out. And as we all know, they're stochastic. Emily Bender's famous phrase about stochastic parrots. You don't know what's going to happen at any given moment. You can say that statistically, a lot of the time it will be right. And for some domains, that's okay if you're like 70% correct. But like if you're recommending an ad. But if you're making a moral decision, that's not good enough. Or if you're making a decision where people's lives are at stake, people are starting to put these into weapon systems, for example. 70% correct without a human in the loop can be really dangerous at that point.
Now, the counter argument from the tech industry would be, okay, look at how much we have accomplished in such a short time, going, the percentage of it being correct is going up so much. And also, we can work with these models and talk with alignment and, make human values part of their system. But this is something you don't believe, right?
That's right. There's a metaphor, it's not originally mine, but I think I was the first to apply it to deep learning, which is that building a ladder doesn't necessarily get you to the moon. Basically, we made ladders that were much taller. People got very excited about them. They put $200 billion into those ladders, but we haven't reached the moon, and that's what was just realized. And that is true across the board. There are many, many things for which they are not actually getting to the moon. They're not even getting to being reliably able to do arithmetic. Right? Yeah. They're not as good as calculators at arithmetic. They're not as good at chess computers or as chess-focused algorithms at chess. And they're not as good at people at like watching a movie and knowing what's going on. So they didn't actually make it to the moon. The ladders are spectacular. I mean, they are works of art. It is amazing that you can take an algorithm that dumb, put that much data in it and get results that good. But it's still not the moon. It just isn't.
Now, let's look at the landscape that all this is happening in. There's a few really big companies, billions of dollars, euros have been invested, and more is coming. These companies are on a path and they do not intend to stop, right? There's even the promise of AGI. At the same time, we are living in a landscape, and I know you wrote your book before the elections, where the tech people are coming in to the government of one of the most powerful nations in the world. What will happen there? It doesn't look good, I think.
It does not look good. I wrote the book in a frenzy so that people could realize how important these issues are. People were very late to recognize how much influence social media has on the world and how much negative influence it has on the world and why it's problematic. And so they treated it, they handled it, or if at all, too late. I mean, like still talking in the United States about something called Section 230 that gives the social media companies immunity from the things that they post, even if they're untrue, even if they deliberately promote things that are untrue, even if those things that they deliberately promote that are untrue cause damage to society, et cetera. They just have blanket immunity. And when I spoke at the Senate, everybody there acknowledged that wasn't a good thing. And then Mark Zuckerberg came back to the Senate a few months later, and again, everybody acknowledges the bad thing, but nothing has happened. So the United States has been very slow to legislate anything around social media, and they're being very slow to legislate anything around technology. The premise of the book was that in the elections, we should be sensitive to that, and we should try to do something. The other premise of the book was probably government wasn't going to do very much, and that people are going to have to organize if we actually want anything done. But ultimately, the book was a warning that the tech oligarchs, particularly in Silicon Valley, are taking over the planet. And even in my wildest nightmare, I don't think it was going to be as bad as it appears that it's actually going to be. So I think the United States, unlike the EU, is going to find itself almost entirely unprotected from various kinds of things. So I just wrote an essay, it'll come out soon enough, they asked for a 2025 prediction. And I'd already predicted that we might see a decline in, kind of bubble crash for another outlet. So I came up with a second prediction, which was we might have a huge cybersecurity hit in 2025 because generative AI makes it easier to do cybercrime. It makes people write bad code, et cetera. And then also you have an administration that seems intent on deregulating everything. So there's not going to be, first of all, staff are going to leave that actually know how to do something about it. And maybe second of all, the rules aren't going to be enforced.
to
So
expand
we're
the doom scenario here a little bit more, I think there's also a very clear indication now that the biggest AI companies are also becoming part of a war machine there, with all the geopolitical tension in the world and Trump leading his country. We now see OpenAI, Anthropic, Palantir, they're all working together with the Department of Defense or with Anduril, which is drones. And there's sort of a weaponization of AI going on as well, right?
That's right. And I mean, you don't want these unreliable technologies to be used as weapons without humans in the loop. But that looks like it is, in fact, what's happening.
It's
I
happening.
have been saying for a while that I think OpenAI is going to become a surveillance company. And I was at least close, right? It's becoming a war machine company, and probably it will use surveillance data for that purpose and so forth. Given all the problems of hallucination, and unreliability and other sorts that I haven't gone into, but the stupid reasoning errors, et cetera, it seems really dangerous. Fundamentally, what these systems do best is they reply if the circumstances are exactly similar to what you've seen before. So AlphaGo works on slightly different principles, but basically it works because it has played billions of games of Go against itself. And if you have a new game, it's kind of similar in certain important respects to old ones. But the reason that things like driverless cars have been problematic is because the world is constantly changing. It's not like Go where you have a fixed board and the rules haven't changed in a couple thousand years. And unfortunately, war is much more to the opposite extreme than driverless cars. So driverless cars should be relatively easy, and we're struggling with them. Go is obviously the easiest because it's fixed. War, I mean, the famous phrase is fog of war. Nobody knows what's going on. You have to make decisions under incomplete information in new regimes where everything you knew is different now because there are drones, or everything was different because people invented automatic weapons if you go back in history, et cetera. So you have constantly changing regime, and that's exactly where these systems are terrible. And now people are going to put them in, not really understanding their limits because the hype train has been so powerful. Even in the media, let alone the companies, there's constant hype about how we're close to AGI, but these technologies are not actually close to AGI. No. They're very unreliable in poorly understood domains, not as reliable as smart people can be.
Now, to give us some perspective, because I also agree that one of the other undiscussed dangerous things is the largest collectors of data in our world are probably secret services who are sort of monitoring everything, and connecting them to the developers of AI will also give them more things. But let's look forward. You have written that you are all for more regulation. This is not likely to happen soon in the United States. But you also think that there are other ways for AI itself to develop, right? I mean, yourself have founded AI companies and sold them, and you know what you're talking about. What other direction than the present direction with the LLMs do you think AI should take?
I wrote an article in 2020, days before the pandemic became a big thing, and so it didn't get widely read. Daniel Kahneman called it totally brilliant. I wish more people would have read it. It was called The Next Decade in AI. It's available free on Archive. And I laid out 4 steps that I still think are the right 4 steps. So the first of those is neurosymbolic AI. And what that means, and it's something I've been championing my whole career, is putting together neural network approaches, large language models are an example, with classic symbolic AI, where you have abstract propositions and symbols that you can reason over with formal techniques and so forth. We still absolutely must do that. The best example of that is AlphaFold, which just won a Nobel Prize. So there is finally being some traction for it. You have people like Hinton and LeCun who for years have ridiculed it. Again, this field has really suffered by not being open-minded, having powerful people ridicule other people, other ideas. We need to go to that idea. DeepMind has been open to it. The other big companies, not so much. They do little bits of it that they don't talk about publicly, but they don't do much of it. This is absolutely necessary. It's not, however, as the philosophers would say, sufficient. So, having a split system between neural networks and symbols that can talk to each other is really important. But you also need large-scale knowledge. You need better reasoning techniques that we have. And you need to be able to build a cognitive model. So what that means is, like in a situation, you can figure out what's going on. Like I'm looking at you, I can tell you're on a stage sitting in a chair. You have something in your hands. Presumably it's a pen. So there's like physical model I'm building of your world. There's also a psychological model. So I'm seeing, how long are your questions? How long do you want the answers to be? Are you smiling? Are you irritated? Should I, change my tack? So I'm building a physical and psychological model of what I see at all times. And then, like, I'm watching you on a Zoom screen. There's a chat window, and so I should check every now and then in case there's an emergency, et cetera. So we're doing this constant process. We do the same thing when we're watching a film. I started watching a new Netflix show yesterday, and so I had a model of the people there and their motivations, et cetera. This is what we do as humans, and we need our machines to do it, and they don't really do it. And so
But you think they could
models,
learn it? No.
Well, I don't think that the current techniques can. I think we need to strive to build techniques that can learn that stuff from relatively short data. Like, think about what you do when you watch a film. I'll allude to a famous film without saying the name, where everybody in the audience was shocked at the final line in the movie, which was, "I see dead people." And everybody in the film, in the theater rather, because we all watched in movie theaters back in that day, simultaneously would have the same reaction of, "Oh my God, everything that I thought when I watched this film is different." When a machine can do that, I'll be really impressed. And when it can do that, watching the film in real time, not looking up what somebody wrote about it, but actually see a new film that has a plot twist and be able to assemble what does it all mean, that will be, a signal that we've gotten somewhere, that we do have systems that have cognitive models, can take symbolic input like dialogue along with visual input, integrate all of that. That'll be amazing, and it will happen, maybe in my lifetime, maybe not.
Will you be building it?
I might be. I mean, it's a very substantial economic investment, and if some benefactor wanted to come to me to place a real serious bet, I'd be interested.
You should come here to Qatar and be on stage. It's a good place. All right. We have 2 minutes left for last word. I mean, the regulation in the US is unlikely to happen. Europe is very busy trying. We have the Digital AI Act and things are happening. Are you looking at other approaches in the world where you can see something else happening than just focus on LLMs that you don't agree with?
I spent a lot of time on policy in the last couple of years. I did it almost entirely pro bono because I wanted to help the world. I thought it was an important moment. I think my next time is going to be focused on the technical side, and I may be a bit quieter about it for a while.
Yeah, we'll be following you. Gary Marcus, thank you so much. And also, everybody, you can get his book when you walk outside, Taming Silicon Valley, and it's definitely worth a read. Gary, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot for having me.